My name is Vera Louise Campbell Bowen, and I grew up in a rural area. I was born in the early 20s, and we had segregation. Strict segregation. They went to different schools. Uh, it was a sad situation, really, because they never came to your front door. They always went to the back door. And my family did not feel the segregation as much as the others did, but the black people always came to the back door, and they always called my parents Sir or Mr. Ms. I mean, they never used they never used their name, just saying the name, uh, even though they knew him well. Even if they had grown up with him, it was always Mr. or Ms. And they went to separate schools. They didn't have very good schools. It was usually a one-room school. And the fairness of that, there was no fairness in that, but segregation had no fairness. And they usually were sharecroppers, and it was according to the type people that they had sharecropping with, because sometimes they had a really rough time. But sharecroppers were people that you got to live in a house. I mean, they would come and interview if they wanted to come to your house, or you would go and ask them. But a lot of times, the people that the sharecroppers were working with, they would volunteer to let them go someplace else. But sharecropping was just that. We had crops in the country, and from what I learned from my parents, the sharecroppers got a share. When the things were sold, when the products were sold, they had a share of the proceeds. I mean, they got a share of what you got. And they had, during the year, they had food allowances. I mean, if they needed food or whatever, they would bring a list and tell you. And it was written down, and what they had bought during the year, then you took that out of their pay at the end of the year. And they lived okay. They didn't, they were never hungry. They were never with that, really. But it was just a hard life, because their life was not their own, and they did what the people told them to, no matter what. And it was really a hard life on.
Was it very easy for a sharecropper to own his property someday?
No, sharecroppers never owned property. There was one family that I know of that the man married a woman that had money. I think she had had a job, saved her money, but anyway, she was pretty wealthy at the time. I mean, it was wealthy for that time, and they had a home. But I don't really know of anyone that really owned their home except that one couple.
When you were a child, were blacks allowed to integrate with your family, and and play with other white children?
The blacks that lived near us on our place, they were welcome. They were welcome to come to see us, and as a matter of fact, we enjoyed having them. But they all came to the back door. You sat down in the yard with them, and it was not appropriate for them to sit in the front yard or come to the front door. And the sharecroppers that we had, they would actually lock the door and leave their babies alone, I mean, in the house, which was very dangerous. And the couple that lived with us had a little girl. She had a baby, and my mother insisted that she not leave that baby locked in the house, to bring her with her. And we thoroughly enjoyed, my sister and I thoroughly enjoyed her coming over and helping my mother because we had a chance to play with Eddie Lee, that was her name. And she was a precious little baby. We were just one out of dozens.
Did the KKK exist in South Carolina when you were young?
Absolutely. And if there was anything that they felt was, that white men felt was a misbehavior, thankfully, my father never approved of them and he never participated in. But a group of white men would get together, even if a black man would pass and say something derogatory to, in the presence of a white woman. And heavens above, it was strictly against the rules for them to ever touch them. But there have been times, I didn't see it, but I know it happened. I mean, I was told, and I knew that did happen, that white men would go to the home of the black men, call them out, and they would have a lynching. A lynching was hanging. And to me, that was very, very inhuman.
Were there separate facilities in your area when you grew up?
Yes, Abbeville, which was the nearest town to us, Abbeville had separate water fountains. The blacks were not allowed to drink from the whites' water fountains. They had separate restrooms, and the doctors and everybody had separate waiting rooms for the blacks and the whites. And the blacks were not allowed into the white waiting rooms. They were not allowed to go to the white bathrooms, and they were not allowed to eat at lunch counters.
What was the difference between the houses that the whites lived in and the blacks?
Usually the houses that the blacks lived in, a lot of times they used whitewash on the walls, which was actually you could get a white clay around springs, creeks, and you mix it with water, and that was what they would whitewash with. They would whitewash the walls, and some of them papered their walls with newspapers to make them warmer, and it was not very attractive, and they tried. They had, they would put flowers in the house or whatever, but it was really depressing to think about how they lived.
Did you ever have any black friends when you were young, growing up in South Carolina?
I had black friends, not really my age. I had black friends that were sharecroppers there, and I thought the world of them. There was Het, which was she and male. They didn't have any children, and she would always come over and she would talk with us and play with us, and she would also, when my mother and dad would have to go into town to see about their families or something, she would spend the night with us, and I enjoyed that. As a matter of fact, we slept on a pallet together.
You talked earlier about going to town with one of your little friends. Can you describe that?
And I had a friend that was practically my age. That she was older than I was. She was 3 or 4 years older than me, and we would go and get brush brooms, which I don't think would be familiar to my grandchildren now. But anyway, we would go out in the woods and get these. I think a lot of them might have been the dogwood. It was the small brush, and we would bring them home, and they would make time together and make brush brooms that we would sweep the dirt yards with. And we had white sand in our front yard, and so did the people that sharecropped with us, and we had flower beds, and it was really quite pretty. And some of them, had flowers. They had different things just like we did, except that they didn't have the privileges that we did. They could not go to church with us, and if anyone had come in, they would take them up to the front in the white church. If a black came in, they would take them to the front. And if we went to the black church, they would seat us at the back. And I don't know what the purpose of that was, except that maybe they didn't trust the blacks. Maybe they wanted them in front so they could see what they were doing. I don't know, but it was. I didn't know too much about it. I didn't know too much difference, except that I do know that my family, they were compassionate, and they had feelings for them, and a lot of people just treated them like slaves. And we didn't feel that that was right, and my mother didn't let it stop her, because when they had a death in the family, she would go and visit with them and see if there was anything she could do, and actually take food to them, you know. But she showed her respect like that, and she never let things stop her, except for the fact that we would not have been accepted, or we would not have been really safe if we had defied them and you know, gone to visit with them. If they came to visit, I mean, if we had gone and had dinner with them, or they came and had dinner with us, and associated with each other like that. But we did, you know, when they would come over, we would ask them to have something to eat, and they would not. You could not bribe them to sit down at the table with you. They just didn't do it.
What do you think would have happened if a white family, or what did happen if a white family defied the code of segregation?
Oh, they would have been outcast. No, none of the white people would have had anything to do with them, and they would have probably been watched. And I've never heard of that, but it would not have been unusual for the white people to be punished. But they never. I never heard of any lynchings or anything with them. But I heard of people having lynchings because maybe somebody stepped out of line, or maybe they thought they stepped out of line. But also it just was a very unfair situation.
Can you describe Prohibition and how it affected you?
Yes, Prohibition didn't really have any effect on me. I did know some people that were bootleggers. That's the way they made their living. And they used the corn, or the grain, and they would have stills. The stills was the way that they made the whiskey, and they would have them down in the woods where they thought nobody would see them, but they had to have a fire, so the law watched them and followed them, and many times found their still and broke them up. You know, they just do away with the still right then and there and take them in. But I don't know of too many people that were locked up for very long for being bootleggers. They just would tap the stills and that was it. But they had the bootleggers had glass jars. It was usually pints and quarts. I don't think they ever had any half gallons. But people could go to the stills and buy a pint or a quart, but they had to let them know that they were coming. They had to know that they could trust them. And it was clear, full of hot water. But I don't think it had the effects of water.
What do you think made FDR such a popular president?
The same thing that is making Obama popular right now is FDR came along with hope, and we had a depression, a deep depression with Hoover. As a matter of fact, they had to park the cars in the garage, and even though Hoover promised a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage, but the problem was that the cars in the garage were jacked up on they were jacked up because they couldn't drive the cars. I mean, they had nothing to drive them with. And the thing about it was that most everybody around where we lived was in the same situation we were. We were, my dad was a farmer, and my mother was a seamstress, and we did really well because my dad grew our food. We had plenty of food. We had wheat to make flour. We had corn, and we made cornbread and ate corn. And we had all different kinds of vegetables and melons. And then we had meats, pork, pork and beef and chickens. I mean, we had plenty of food. And my mother sewed. She was a seamstress. And they had when Roosevelt came in, he did do something about it. He had projects that people could do to actually make a living. And my father worked on the road. We had dirt roads, and he would actually go out and dig the ditches that they had to keep for the water to run in. And it was not just it was real work that needed to be done, and that's what they did, and they got some pay for it. And also my mother, they had a place that my mother could go and they would give her bolts of fabric. And for every bolt of fabric, for every garment that bolt of cloth that she used, she could make 2 garments for us. So we had plenty of warm clothes and plenty of food. And when people didn't really have the food, we shared with them.
Can you describe the fireside chat?
Well, there was only one family in our community. We lived in the country, and there was one family that eventually got a radio. It was a battery radio because we didn't have electricity, and the families would get together. They would notify the families, and there would be several families that would go at one time, and the children would play, and the grown-ups would sit around the radio and listen to FDR, and that was what we called our fireside chat, I guess.
What were the types of games you played when you were young?
I don't think my grandchildren would. I don't think they can conceive of not having a radio or a television. But we had lots of games that we played. We played. My sisters and I played jackstones. We played hopscotch, jump rope, and stick baseball, and dodgeball. We played a lot of games. Also, we could go down in the pasture in the country, and we had grapevines, and there was a wide creek, and we would swing across the creek on the grapevines. We would climb trees, and we never were without anything to do. We were very tired at the end of the day, but it wasn't then like it is now, because our parents knew that we were there, and they didn't have to know every minute that we were down at the creek or wherever. I mean, as long as they knew our general direction, they were fine with that.
How did technology first come into your life, and how did it change it?
Well, first I have to tell you what we did. For a long time, we did have ice, but the Iceman came around in a truck, and we could buy 25 pounds, 50 pounds, and usually we would buy 50 pounds for a week, and it would be, they would put it in the crib and have, we would have something in there like cottonseed, to absorb it, and put it in there with something to keep it cool, to keep it from melting, and it would last from one week to the other. So we did have ice. We had iced tea, but it was we would always look for the Iceman, especially in the summertime. He did not come around in the wintertime, but in the summertime we had the people to live at our ice. And then later on, the first thing that we got was it was a battery radio, and we all enjoyed that. And when the batteries would go dead, we would hook it up to the car battery, which that was not a good thing. But we finished listening to our programs, but it was helpful. And then the first appliance that we got was refrigerator, because the ice boxes that my grandmother, she lived in town, the ice box that she used was a little bit like a refrigerator, but they would keep the ice in one side, and they'd have a little space to keep the ice, and then they'd keep the milk and everything in the other side. But the refrigerator was one of the best inventions, because it kept the food, and we all enjoyed that.
Great. Can you describe the outhouse and its use?
Yes, the outhouse was our bathroom. Not a bathroom, it was our toilet. And we would go to the outhouse, and we had Sears catalogs in the outhouse. That was our toilet tissue.
Did you have electricity when you were growing up?
Oh, heavens, no, we didn't. They didn't even have any lines in the country. My grandmother had electricity. She lived in Abbeville, and it was cords that hang down from the ceiling with a bulb in it, and that was the first electricity that they had. But we didn't have any electricity. We used oil lamps, and if we didn't keep them lit in every room because it was not safe, but we would carry a lamp from one room to the other, and actually would study by lamplight. And my mother had a wood stove and iron pots, and she was a very good cook. But every morning my dad got up and made a fire in the stove and made the coffee, and then my mother went in and cooked breakfast. But we had no electricity, we had no telephones, and we had didn't have many conveniences, but what we did have, we enjoyed. And then eventually we got electricity, and that was just like lighting up the world. We really enjoyed that, because every room had a light in it. Every room had a electric light that hung from the ceiling. There was no fans. There was no globes to go over the lights. It was just lights. But and then after we had electricity, my mother actually cooked on a wood stove quite a while after we got electricity, because she just wanted to, I think. I mean, she really didn't want to get an electric stove, but it was just one of the things that went along with our living, that we enjoyed the wood stove, the food cooked on it. And then they finally got electric stove when they built a house in Abbeville, because the highway. They were taking a highway from Abbeville to Greenwood, and it was going to go straight through our lot where our house was. So my dad sold our house to them, and he died. He died by about 3 months before time for them to move. So my mother had to get out and find a lot and have a house built, and that was the one that they lived in as long as they lived.
When did you get your first TV?
I think we got our first TV. I'm trying to think what year it was. It was probably around 1952 or 53 that we got a TV. Most people had radios, and then when we did get a TV, it was after Phyllis was born, so she was 3 or 4 years old when we got a TV.
Can you remember how much you paid for your first television?
Oh, I think it was about $25.
Tell me about when you first heard that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
It was a Sunday afternoon, we heard it on the radio, and it was really hard to believe. Just upset the entire country, and it was really unbelievable because nothing like that had ever happened. And I remember that FDR came on the radio, and he said that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor and that we were at war.
And how did that make you feel?
It was, I can't even explain my feelings. It was a feeling of fear and a feeling of desperation and frightening.
How did your job change with the beginning of World War II, and why did it change?
I was a inspector of fabric at Abbeville Mills, and we continued to make the fabric that we had been making, but then we switched over. When we really got into the war, we switched over to parachute material, and I inspected parachute material. Very rewarding to feel like I had a little hand in helping people in the war, the soldiers. And I mean, it turned our lives upside down, because being able to go into the store and buy a nylon hose, buying meat, everything was rationed, and gas was rationed. You could get 3 gallons of gas a week with coupons. But if you used your coupons ahead of time, then you was just out. You had to save your coupons to do what you had to do. But the meat and coffee, everything was rationed.
Okay. Did you listen to music growing up as a young child?
Yes, I did. I enjoyed music, and we had plays, and they had bands that they would hire to come in and perform at Campbell School. That's where I went to school, elementary school, and they would come in on weekends, and usually on Saturday nights, and the place was packed. And the band would play the music, then they would ask if we had any requests, and that was quite an experience then. But,
What type of music was played?
it was a lot of country music, a lot of country western. That was about it.
Can you tell us about John F. Kennedy and what made him so special?
John F. Kennedy was young. He had new ideas, and he was everybody's president. And I believe the Kennedys were the one that started the doing away with segregation, and I think they got it started, and then of course Lyndon Johnson, and he was one too, but I believe it was Kennedy that planted the thought of doing away with segregation, and he just had a lot of good ideas. He was a lot like Obama. He gave us hope, and he carried through with it. He did everything that he tried to do. I mean, he was trying to do, and he really accomplished most everything that he started.
When did you first hear that the JFK had been assassinated, and how did that make you feel?
When JFK was assassinated, I can remember well, because I was sewing. I was making a dress, and I had the television where I could see it, and it was just unbelievable. It came on that the president had been assassinated. I mean, it came on. I actually saw when he fell over in the car. I actually saw when he was shot. I mean, the shot rang out, and they would filming this. They would had this on television. They had it going because he was in a parade, and so they knew that he was coming in, and they had everything televised, with the parade and everything that he was in. And he was in a convertible with no top. He had the top back. He always wanted to be out in the open. And when that shot rang out and he fell over on Jackie's shoulder, and it was just unbelievable. So I really actually saw when he got shot, and I also saw when Jack Ruby shot Lee Oswald in the jail. They were taking him in, and I don't know what the purpose of that was, unless it was something that they didn't want known or something, but Jack Ruby shot the assassinator.
And how did that make you feel?
Well, I was so in shock about the president. That was really a horrible thing. I mean, it was just unbelievable, because this young man, this young president, to see him literally shot, and to see the blood on Jackie's dress, and it was just unbelievable. It made me feel terrible.
What do you think the greatest invention was in your lifetime?
The telephone.
And why?
Because that was a way that we could communicate with each other. We could call the doctor. We could. There were so many things that we could do that we couldn't do.
In your opinion, what is the most significant event ever to take place in your lifetime?
The man walking on the moon. At the time, it was a little frightening for me, and I know that my children disagreed with me, and they really laughed at me, but I just felt like it. You'd look at the moon and you could imagine anything, the man and the moon, and it took away the mystery of the moon. It was really significant to watch. It was amazing to see Neil Armstrong on the moon, and he stood there and made a speech and actually we saw him walking on the moon, and that was really a big mystery, and it was really significant. I think it changed the world.
In your opinion, who is the greatest American in your lifetime?
I think that FDR was very significant. He was very important. But I tell you what, my husband was the most important American in my life.
How has the United States changed in your lifetime?
My children were in school for the first integration, the first blacks that went to school. I don't think they had too many at first, but that was, to me, that was significant, because I felt like it was the beginning of fulfilling the Bible, really, because God has plainly told us that everybody was born equal. We're all His children, and equality had not entered the picture till they did start the integration. But it was hard, and it's still really going on today, but hopefully, I hope that in my lifetime that I will see people actually embracing each other. You don't look at color, you don't look at race, you look at people as your brothers and sisters. I mean, we all God's children.
What do you like about Barack Obama?
He is riveting. His speeches are riveting. He is very intelligent, and he can hold anyone's attention.
If you can compare him to any president in the history of the United States, who would that be and why?
Jack Kennedy, because he is about the age that Kennedy was, and everyone thought that a lot of people thought that Kennedy was too young, but he made a wonderful president what time he was alive, and I believe that Barack would, because actually he just talks about hope and about the things to come instead of going back into the past and dredging up things that are past. They're gone. And I feel like that we need to look to the future.
I just have one final question. Does Philly's mama really love Obama?
Billy's mama loves Obama. Oh, there's just one more thing. I hope you guys know what a good teacher you have. Marty's the greatest.